Stewardship is really speaking about what I do today will leave a legacy. It's about taking responsibility, wanting to make an impact on the long term, not just for yourself, but for generations to come.
The leaders of the world meeting at the UN in New York agreed a new set of global goals for the development of the world to 2030.
At some point, you will want to impact others. People that have psychedelic experiences, I do believe that they indeed have more willingness to become stewards in a way, because we are so self-obsessed. So working with the rites of passage in a way can help you evolve as human beings.
Hello, Natasja, and welcome to Existentia. Thank you so much for having accepted our invitation to be here. Today we are going to talk about stewardship, psychedelics, and understand how we can all be stewards for the planet and for each other. Before we get into the topic, can you first tell us a little bit about your story? How was Natasja as a child, and who is Natasja now?
So Natasja as a child and Natasja today are actually not so different, to be very honest. I think one of the things that I've tried to cultivate is always a sense of playfulness and looking for things that outside of the box. And as a child, growing up in three different cultures, three different lands, moving about, learning different environments, one of the things that I think as a child I had was a massive amount of empathy and curiosity. I remember just being with my mom in the middle of the city and just walking around and looking at someone and just running to them and grabbing their hand and just walking along with them, just wanting to make contact with people. And I think that kind of quality of contact and curiosity and that playfulness is a lot of the times what we lose as we become adults. We get in this very serious place. And through my personal work of always trying to be a little bit on the edge of society as a misfit or an underdog, or, always trying to just be at the forefront, maybe even in some terms early adapter in a lot of the work that I do, you always walk a kind of edge. And I even recall when I was really small, even with my cousins, we were playing things that we were playing theater, we were doing interviews. I had my first radio show with an old school radio cassette tape, and I would record the weather report in the shower and all of that. And everything I ever played, I actually do as an adult. I have a podcast, I am on a stage, there is a part of a performance. I even used to play teacher, and I used to play also at some point being a witch and making potions and putting those potions on the door of my neighbors who were bullying me and pretending that that was doing something to them, So I think everything I played, I actually incorporated in my serious adult life.
Thank you for sharing all of this. Did you actually have some influences when you were growing up? Did you always feel connected to helping others?
Yes, helping others was always part of my mission. I also feel that I was led into it, interesting enough. I think we are born with parents that teach us, for better or worse, things. And that catapults us in our belief system, maybe our curiosity, but also our wounding, right? And growing up in an environment where opioid addiction and alcohol addiction were very present in my family constellation from even my mother's side and my father's side, that created, of course, wounding and challenges and also trauma, but it also catapulted me in a very positive way of being very curious. Why do we become the way we become? What are the conditions that create these dependencies? And sometimes it's not only with substance dependence, but sometimes it's also dependency in relationships or behaviors, right? So that is something that influenced my path into wanting to understand why are we the way we are, and then what can we do to change that? Because I've also always felt that you can do something about things, you can learn, you can grow. And at a very young age, I discovered from spiritual practices to therapeutic practices, coaching practices, shamanic practices, all of those things, why I stepped into it is to find answers. And at the end, in the beginning of my journey, it actually fueled wanting to heal those family members. But because everybody's got a free will, I'm not in control of their choices of healing or not. But that, I think, was the fuel for a very long time of wanting to be of service and helping people heal and transform whatever they were working through traumatically. And that was my why. And then that part of why also changed because I didn't want to focus just on the wounding place of people. Throughout my journey in working, and especially when it comes to plant medicines and psychedelics, there is so much more that these kind of settings, or how I like to say it, containers, can help you evolve as human beings. And for example, one of the things I like to refer to is Adlerian psychology or philosophy, where yes, there are these wounds in the past, but today we can choose and set new commitments, and I call them devotional practices or new goals towards our future. So in these settings, working towards models that help us step out of the wounded place and into a more sovereign, empowered place. And then also, we have grief and we have relationships. We open up our heart within the situations, and that could be a friendship or a lover, and those things can also bring in deep, deep transformative places when they change or when they don't seem to be working anymore in the way you want them to work. And those pain moments are sometimes the most powerful catalysts for change. Because they help us to actually get out of our comfort zone too, in our structure, and they rub against something, and they help us to redefine our identity or maybe our preferences or, how we stand with ourselves and others. So yes, my influences came from childhood, and then of course also life, and the choices I have made, I've always felt guided in them. And interesting enough, psychedelics and even plant medicines in that way, I've never felt an ambition to be serving it. This is not something I woke up one day on the mat and ayahuasca told me, now you'll become a healer. No, that's not how it works. Actually, you go through a lot of dark nights of the soul. You go through a lot of messy things. And before you know it, you're invited into something. And that invitation asks for a very deep internal practice. So I feel there was a guidance, but the guidance was more on heal yourself, understand what your own wounding is, what your shadow work is, how you relate to the world, why I'm doing the thing that I'm doing, as I explained, my why, and also trying to untangle from my why in that, because there is a lot of savior complex and wounded healer complex in that why. So that path, and then bit by bit becoming a lot more clear of, okay, what if I'm doing this from a place of abundance and not from a place I need to save the world?
At this point, I would like to ask you, what was the book that has changed the way you see the world and that has impacted you the most?
What's the book that actually impacted my life most, which I'm going to do a little plug because this plug is very important to me, because it's a book from my grandmother, Pelgrom. And it's in Dutch, it's called Kleine Sophie in Lange Wapper, which in English is Little Sophie. And I think it's Flap something. And it's a story, that was one of her first children's books. And she started to be actually a writer in her 40s. It's just before I got born, in the 70s. And she won a lot of awards in this book. And it's about a little girl that actually gets really sick. And although she had awards for it, it was very controversial for its time, because it wasn't about a fairy tale. It was a kind of, this girl is sick in bed and severely sick, and actually goes into kind of a delirium in a kind of a psychedelic space with it. And then without it being literal in the book, at the end, she continues to be in this kind of fantasy world and doesn't get out, which, as adults reading into it, you would know she has passed. So a child passing and being in that kind of psychedelic environment, right, was super controversial to speak about death and in children. But the book itself is absolutely brilliant and beautiful. And although it's for children, it has an adult flavor to it. And I want to say this book because my own ancestors and my own grandmother, stepping out into a whole new career in her 40s after being with her kids, husband separated, all of that is something that has influenced my life in a very, very big way. That you're never too old to learn something new. You can always change your life. You can always move a country. My grandmother, this specific grandmother, also moved countries in her 80s, always, she just turned 90 and she just wrote her last book, probably her last book, she said, so it's kind of these things. But this story to me is very significant of actually speaking into truth, bringing truth in a way that is absolutely beautiful without it needing to be scary. And at the same time, it represents for me a lot of my own work, because psilocybin for me in that relationship and a lot of the psychedelics compounds, what they do is expose you to illusion, your own illusions, your own limiting beliefs, right? Your own shortcomings in that way, your shadow. But at the same time, I have a quality of beauty about it, about bringing that truth into that. So this book is for me at a very young age and still till today, the book that, touches me.
Now I would like to step into one of the main topics of our conversation, and we would like to know how you define stewardship, especially in the context of leadership and personal transformation.
So how I define stewardship in the context of personal transformation and leadership is actually something that I have to go a little bit back, because stewardship is not anything new, right? Stewardship is a way of being that has been with us for eons. In a way, how, those who walked this land before us understood really well that whatever we do today will impact generations after. Now, going back to today, we live in an environment that our political system is only 4 years. So we think about 4 years. Let's leave it at that. Maybe sometimes even shorter cycles, depending where we're looking at, even within companies or and nowadays on social media is even shorter because, we need to make a reel within 1 minute. You're like a 1 minute impact, so it gets even more condensed. Stewardship is really speaking about what I do today will leave a legacy. It's about legacy, but then also it's about taking responsibility. So stewardship is a place and a quality that I really want to embed and invite in, and especially in the work that I do and people that come to our services and our retreats, that's the ultimate cultivation. Because as you work on self, there is only, so much satisfaction in that. At some point, you will want to impact others in whatever shape or form. That can be your family members, it can be your child. It doesn't have to be this big visionary accomplishment. But stewardship is by understanding that what I do today has and will be an impact for tomorrow, and I have a responsibility and an accountability to it. And bringing the quality actually from stewardship into leadership, right? So that as we redefine leadership in also corporate environments, for example, I will give an example of one of my mentees who is an executive coach, and she coaches people from, let's say, for example, in different IT companies. She's from the UK, she lives in Dubai, it's a very different environment. And when I'm mentoring her, we're always speaking, should become a corporate shaman, but hidden, right? The hidden corporate shaman. So it's bringing, this mentee understands that these qualities and how to bring actually the qualities of not only working for profit, but also working for people and impact after. How to actually bring these strategies back into these environments where naturally stewardship qualities of thinking ahead are embedded in the organization. Now, there are also organizational models. If we go really practical, stewardship models in organizations is that, for example, the founder of a company is not the owner of the company, is the steward for an X amount of time. So the company actually owns itself in a stewardship model. So that's a very different thing. So you start to make investment, start to maybe include the people that you work with on the longer term, maybe even their family members. If you're a clothing brand, for example, which I have a friend that advises and does strategic advising from a stewardship concept, that you have a legacy where how is the materials created? Can the family members be benefited? So it becomes a much slower business model instead of the fast-paced business model, which we're all part of, right? So that slowness and that legacy and long-term vision.
Yeah. And you think the qualities of what it is to be a steward that you mentioned, do you think this is innate to people? Anyone can be a steward, or we can cultivate it through experience, reflection, and community engagement?
Yeah, my personal view, if everybody can be a steward, yes or no, I'm an ultimate optimist. So I'll say yes, everybody can be a steward. Of course, I think stewardship, it's just a matter of, I'm defining it in this way. I think a lot of people are doing it, but maybe are not calling themselves that way or are not defining it maybe that way. The same thing goes with a sense of intuitive capacity. There is a CFO in a company that I'm mentoring, and he's with me because, as a mentee, not because I have now so much expertise of that role, not at all, but he has acknowledged that all his decisions that he makes at the core of big decisions are intuitive decisions. And then he gathers data, of course, but there is a gut feeling and there is a pattern in that. And it's interesting, he would never call himself a steward or an intuitive person, but he does acknowledge that he's driven by his innate instinct or innate knowing in that, right? So absolutely, I think everybody has the capacity to influence other people. And we do that every day, naturally, taking responsibility, accountability, leadership, and a sense of wanting to make an impact on the long term. So not in the successes of today, but the long-term impact, not just for yourself, but for generations to come. So, and acknowledging those qualities and cultivating those qualities in psychedelic spaces depends on the method that is being used, of course, and how the set and setting are places where that learning to do that can be condensed in a shorter amount of time.
And you think people that participate, for instance, in psychedelic experience, or people that have profound spiritual experience, they are more willing to want to become a steward?
People that have psychedelic experiences, I do believe that they indeed have more willingness to become stewards in a way. I do believe that a lot of them then start to feel a calling to also bring change and impact. The one thing that I think is a very fine line is you don't need to become a steward by serving medicine, right? That calling, I sometimes think that's maybe not the path. Being an impactful leader can be in so many different ways. I also believe that a lot of the times people should not quit their jobs and become corporate shamans, for example, or whatever name, or facilitator in this space, right? So if you have changed your belief systems, if you have come to a place of understanding what your wounding is, if you've come to a place of, let's say, maybe a deeper connection to nature, Maybe you have now a different relationship to food. Maybe you're more able to concentrate on reading a book and not getting distracted. These qualities are precious qualities that if you bring that person into an environment that has a lot of high stresses, automatically will impact that environment. So sometimes it doesn't need to be by how we become to have impact or be stewards. It's just the way we are in that environment is enough. And this is also something that is, in terms of the personal development space, in the broader sense, is we always need to accomplish something, do something, be better, learn more. I know that. I have the same kind of things, tendencies. But at some point, you're also just good to just the way you are. And you being in that different environment or that stressing environment can already be an impact, can already calm the place. You might ask a type of question that nobody has ever thought about. You might just say something that in this specific way. You might have a meeting with a colleague and say, hey, instead of us sitting in the office, do you feel like going for a walk and have this conversation? That in itself can be a complete game changer in an environment, in a corporate environment. So I believe that impact and stewardship can be really small steps. It doesn't have to be, now I need to serve psychedelics.
Do you think instead of wanting to serve psychedelics, people should have these experiences as a form of rites of passage in a way?
I think naturally speaking, we crave for those rites of passages, but we've lost, let's say, the cosmology and the structure and the elders that are keeping that. So we're looking a lot around, different continents, like, oh, this is how you do it, that's how you do it. Now when I look back at a lot of these places and moments, I feel like these were rites of passages that life has brought to me or given me, and moments that transition significantly. Rites of passages in that sense are really, really important to actually also have a society that is supportive of each other. Because what it helps you do, a rites of passage, is also have a different relationship with your egoic tendencies. Because we are so self-obsessed, right? And so much about self. A rites of passage brings you back into that you're part of the whole, and there is a consequence and a discernment you need to do that will impact that community. So working with the rites of passage in a way, or a vision quest, or any form that helps your ego come to a little bit of humility, right? So yes, it's important to bring that in.
Now I would like to step in your work as a facilitator and as a space holder. We know that you have been working for more than 10 years with entheogens and psychedelics. What were the biggest challenges for you of working with those substances?
Yes. The biggest challenges working when entheogenic settings and psychedelic work, they vary over the years. It's interesting because it's not necessarily the sacrament or the compound that is the challenge. Although it is a relationship you have to foster, and it will kick your butt if you're out of tune in any shape or form. The challenge is most of the time that we live in a society, for example, this is my personal challenge, is where I live in a society where on one hand, I have a very entrepreneurial brain, right? So I love my Excel spreadsheets. As much as I find it very important to have a relationship with the quality or the compound or the spirit of a plant, right? So, but when you're out of that container, I need to be a functioning adult, right? I need to be in those kind of structures and societies. And sometimes it feels very lonely and very far away worlds. The challenge sometimes would be to have that closer together, where there is more understanding as a carrier of specific medicine, to have, let's say, a society support system around that, an acknowledgement of that. Because you're almost forced to justify either one or the other. So that's a personal challenge that I'm always trying to bridge and find community or environments that have that line a little bit thinner. Then another challenge which is more a challenge in terms of the containers, is really finding the right people that are in alignment with your values. because it's a growing and it's become a market, and I'm part of that market. I've been blessed in that market as much as anybody else, but it's really deep work. And the intimacy, and I'm saying the word intimacy not from a relational sensual aspect, but it's a very intimate, close relationship that you need to have with each other, even as a support guides, for the container itself to feel really safe and in relationship, because people are going to come where at their most precious and vulnerable states. So they have to feel they're in a safe place, in a trusting place, and in a place where they can really surrender into whatever they're supposed to learn about themselves. So the challenge sometimes is finding the coherence within the group that has a certain level of expertise and experience that is also diverse enough. Because I don't want 9 of the same Natasjas around me. I want people that complement me, so you become a holistic place so that the group receives what they need. And that's sometimes very challenging to find that mechanism. It's like a glove that needs to fit, a clockwork that needs to fit. And that takes years and years and years of dedication to fine-tune what is the makeup. Now, it's not just a job title and put it on LinkedIn, like these are the bullet points that I'm looking for. It's actually 2 nervous systems that need to be coherent with each other.
So you've mentioned that one of the biggest challenges that you actually face, it was to create a safe space. So my question would be how you create a safe environment for your clients to process their traumas and challenges.
So how I create a safe space for our clients that come to us in our retreats and our settings and the work and the practices that I do is, there's multiple layers. First of all, I call it the layer of the cognitive. Safety is created by people understanding what they're doing. It's very basic. It's like if you're a child and you are going to have a sleepover over at grandmother's and grandpa, maybe already 3 days before, you're going to mark the calendar, you're going to pack the bag, you're going to say how it's going to run, the toothpaste is going to be in there, all of these steps. The same thing, not because I'm treating adults like children, but our mind need prediction to feel safe. Need to understand the lay of the land. This is also how our animal part in our brain works. If I can map out my environment, my brain is actually saying there is no tiger coming. My nervous system will relax, right? So it's laying out the map. So a lot of it in preparation, it works with creating a cognitive structure of explaining what are we doing, how we're doing it, and why. These 3 things always need to be answered. Then there is an emotional preparation that always takes place, which is also part of getting to know each other, right? So the group coherence is extremely important. It's really interesting because now there is so much more research coming out as well on the group impact, which I go inside of me, duh. Yes, of course, group work has been with us way before this research was come out. But the group coherence is extremely important to people feel there is a link in each other's stories, that can recognize each other. Empathy is already created, and a form of compassion can already be created in that. And also, the things that others can expose about ourselves to start to understand that. Then there is a part where there is a sense of safety which is created, which most people might really disregard, but it's in the place that the transformation is going to take place. The actual physical environment. I have a hospitality background, and I believe that I always share with our volunteers and team members that a very funny anecdote that really brings the point across, which is, if there isn't enough toilet paper in a toilet, how the hell are you going to feel safe to bring all your emotional things towards the setting if you can't even take care of the most basic needs of someone? So I always share this toilet paper thing because it isn't about, in a psychedelic ceremony, sitting next to someone and holding someone's hand who was crying. That is all. That's the last little step of safety, right? That's when all the safety has already been done, that someone actually feels safe to ask for what they need. So it's bringing the understanding of the environment, the eye for detail, the structure in it, enough space where everybody feels seen. Then there is another part which creates safety, is the amount of people I work with. I'm very careful of not having big groups because I want a coherence to be there. I don't want to deplete myself. So we have retreats where the max is only 8 people for that reason, right? So this is where the safety is. And then, of course, there are physical safety of screening protocols and all of the things that need to tick off the boxes on a physical, emotional, and psychological aspect. And then there is a metaphysical safety, which is the more transpersonal acknowledgement that these experiences of expanded states touch upon the interconnectedness, the cosmos, the spiritual aspect. So there is a relational space that needs to be acknowledged from the unseen and have a relationship with to keep that safe. And if I would simplify that, is to having a metaphorical language with symbology that helps us then psychologically and emotionally to surrender into experiences.
And after this safety is taken care, we would like to know how crucial it is for you to integrate mind, body, and spirit during and after an altered state experience.
So how to integrate a holistic way of body, mind, and spirit after a psychedelic experience? It really, there are some basic elements that you can bring into the integration process. But first, you have to ask the individual that has gone through maybe a ceremonial setting or a therapeutic container, right? So the individual might need to formulate a specific pathway after. That's very tailored to the needs of that person. So there's maybe some basic understanding that you have to touch on the most holistic way. The retreats that we've started since 2017 have always looked at being as much as possible from a holistic perspective to really touch every single point of the human, so it becomes a more integrated aspect of their day-to-day life. Now, one person might need to emphasize more on getting a better relationship with their body. So that might be a bigger chunk of the integration cake that they need to focus on. Some people realize that there's maybe something that feels unresolved in their life, and they need some counseling. And they need a specific type of counseling. There are so much amazing types of counseling and therapy in the world, so they might need a specific trajectory over maybe a year. In an example, we had a client at one point and a participant in our retreat, and she had discovered that there was a lot in her upbringing that she really hadn't looked at, and suddenly all of these things had come up in a retreat setting, and it came up really through the physical experience of the journeys. And that physical experience exposed to her the disconnect she actually felt to her physical body. So in the integration process, that what we provided is more focus on that, but going after that, really inviting her to find someone that is a somatic experiencing therapist that focuses on the nervous system trauma work over, let's say, an extended time, which in her case was really dedication of a year. So integration is an ongoing process, and it really depends on the individual where they need to emphasize on, but always coming at it in a most holistic way. So even in our own retreat, before people leave, they create actually their own cosmology, their own medicine wheel, as they call it. Like you have the north, the south, the east, the west. Each represent a quality, so the mind, body, spirit, of course, and also the internal way of knowing, which we also bring in the community aspect. So they actually draw out their own medicine wheel to touch each of these qualities and each of these elements, and then write down a commitment they are willing to make towards that part of their integration. And for some of them, some people read a lot all the time, and what they might need to emphasize on is to maybe draw more, so they maybe work with integration in this side. So everybody is different, but the structure of integration, to make it holistic, is actually a methodology that I've created.
If possible, we would like to ask you some pieces of advice for someone that feels the need or the call to step in as a guide or as a facilitator and eventually become a steward in the space.
Someone new in the space of psychedelics who feels the calling to step in as a guide or a facilitator, the best thing that I could say is there are amazing things you can learn online. Literally, I don't have anything to dispute about the massive content that is now available online. But true learning here in this space can only be done in person. You have to have multiple experiences. And I'm not saying the amount of personal experiences in taking psychedelics, because I believe that maybe one experience and you integrate it really deeply over a year can sometimes be more valuable than doing 3 or 4 experiences in that year, right? So it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. But actually sitting in containers with different maybe approaches to help you define and really witness and just be a student. Being a student in a container and being, for example, a supporter in a container will help you really define yourself more and more, and also help you ask right questions. Another thing is that is really important for people to ask, why do you want to do it? I believe you have to put every 6 months, ask yourself, how are you identifying with this work? What kind of identifications and attachment styles do you have to it? And why are you doing it? And, the answer of really deeply understanding your why, is it, yes, I want to make people healthy. Yeah, that's one level of your why. But there's 3 levels underneath that why still, more deeper whys that can be uncovered. So can you really be truthful to yourself in that? Then another tip that people really need to know is, what don't you know? You have to consistently look for what you're not aware of. This is a catalyst. This work will catalyst your own processes. It will catalyst be a catalyst for your relationships, will be a catalyst for, even if you're not taking anything, just being in that environment, it will expose a lot. So how are you able to hold it? How are you able to be with that? What is your boundaries like? How do you understand boundaries? How do you work with them? How don't you work with them? But the most important thing is getting your why and getting as much in-person practice from the student. And it doesn't matter if you have very important titles and you've studied already a lot. If you don't have experience in it, you're going to be forever a student in that space. You will never have a piece of paper that will tell you, now I am, a master at this. Because the one thing I can tell everybody, I really is the cliche, the more I know, the less I know. Really. I've been in this space for more than 10 years, and every few months I question if I should be serving this medicine. And I question that because of the dependencies we create with it. That's very human, it's very normal. And especially when there are financial dependencies on it. So you have to understand the best way to actually stay in your integrity is to be as independent as possible with it, so you can say no. You don't have to do things. Just because you got a message in a ceremonial setting doesn't mean that that's the ultimate truth, right? So understanding these aspects, very simple, get your why together really clearly, learn, be a continuous student, always learn, and make sure you actually have a diverse, maybe peers or supervisors that can call you out.
After all these pieces of advice, we would like to have your view on the future of stewardship especially with the rise of these complementary healing approaches?
So the future of stewardship and how it will hopefully evolve is that I really believe that more people are feeling a calling for change, because the intensity of the world and the complexity is growing. So you're seeing a lot of the rise even in the psychedelic spaces as well. There is, interesting enough, there are smaller communities happening. So one of the things that I'm seeing is, for example, dilapidated little villages in the south of Europe are being brought up by a group of people, and they're starting a community, right? And they're self-sustainable, regenerative farming. You see a very big rise on regenerative farming, regenerative strategies, regenerative leadership, even these combination of words. And then stewardship also being the impact of that. You're also seeing it in the different types of words that are being used, that are being, let's say, from a popular aspect being used. There is a university in the Netherlands who are organizing events with philosophers and researchers, and then with an experiential. And they're calling it sacred sessions, which to me is very funny that an academic establishment would, for example, bring those words together, right? So there is an acknowledgement taking place and bringing that stewardship, and also seeing that, for example, in the monoculture and the regenerative farming, that they're creating ways and waves of impact to change our soil for other generations to come, because otherwise we don't have healthy foods anymore, right? So I think across many different disciplines, stewardship is becoming more of an understanding of, we can't live any longer in the way that we've been doing and depleting our environment. And then there are amazing initiatives around, of course, how to work with the challenges of plastic, and certain fungi are able to transmute the plastic into other materials. And there's so much involvement taking place right now. There's so much change taking place. So stewardship as a way of being, and probably infused with things that we will need, right? Qualities that we will need across different disciplines. Maybe innovation in one discipline will be more part of that stewardship, while maybe in another discipline, it might be more mentorship or more eldership is needed for advice. So I think it will probably transition into the needs and to solve the complexities of that.
And do you believe that steward could be seen as a job position of the future?
Yeah, in the corporate world, having stewardship is, yes, wouldn't that be beautiful to actually have, and not just an advisory board, but let's say a stewardship model into a corporate model actually being embedded, that are there to uphold the values of the organization that it has, and looks at it as a long term. So they will be, let's say, the guardians of those values for the legacy and the long-time benefit of people that, from just the people that are there in that moment, right? So for the longer term. It would be absolutely beautiful that would be a layer within the organization that is automatically, and not just, as a little token, like we've got stewards here, but an actual. And to be honest, it's not an easy structure to bring into our in society as a business structure. There are many things you have to put in place. But there is an organization that advises on how to become a steward-owned organization. So there is a little rise of that acknowledgement into corporate environments, yes.
Now I would like to introduce the concept of technology and stewardship. How do you believe AI and technology is going to impact the future of stewardship? And how do you envision this happening?
The technological evolution and stewardship, I probably most likely will be something hand in hand. It's a very interesting time to predict how the one will impact the other. I personally don't have any fear around that technology at all, because it's part, in the end, it's, let's say, a golden version, an ultimate golden version of our Google search. It's just extremely fast. And it's not intelligent. We call it, intelligence, but it's just a really fast search engine in a way, right? So in that, and then another part is how I always like to approach things that maybe be fearful is, I always find it very interesting when people say that one thing is more sacred than the other thing, which then taps into our duality in our existence. But what if we truly believe that everything is interconnected, right? And everything is part of the whole, then this is also part of the whole, right? Just because one compound or one molecule is organic versus the other molecule isn't, is LSD less effective because it's more alchemized from fungi, or is organic mushroom more effective because it's organic? It depends on the needs of the individual, what they need, and what kind of outcome they want to work towards to know which compound they would need for that specific outcome. So it's the same thing, is how can you work with the tools that are there? Now, in a way, I have personally think of this. If everything is interconnected, I'm infusing ChatGPT, for example, with a lot of medicine knowledge. So I'm infusing it with messages, texts, learnings, psychedelic, plant medicine, spirit realms, all of that. I'm infusing that realm with the realm of the teachings of actually the interconnectedness and metaphysical understanding that I've gathered from psychedelics. So I'm going like, at least there is that knowledge going in there as well, and it's not separate.
And now is in question, and we know that psychedelics normally bring people into these unknown realms. How do you approach these realms? How do you handle with the mystery of the human mind, the mystery of healing and consciousness, and all the things we still don't know yet?
So how I define the relationship with consciousness and the great mystery is, through the work with psychedelics and specific molecules, and going even without compounds, going into a trance state. So let's call it like that. Through the act of a repetition of sound, you can go into a trance state, right? And this is where we tap in to broaden from the I, going into a deeper layers of our subconscious mind, of our subconscious knowing, or even to layers within our body, which is also something that is not really a lot spoken about, because even in the words that we use, we say psychedelics, is related to the mind. It's a lot the mind, and we're almost like unconnecting here. But it's all of the work at the end is really through the bodily and sensory experiences, the senses, and coming into those sensory experiences. So connecting to a consciousness is the deeper you're able to connect through the bodily experience, through the awakening experience, through the actually physical body, the deeper you're able to go and tap into knowledge that is within even our DNA, that is in our collective knowing, that is, for example, from different societies. We can now see that even through science. I remember 20 years ago, science was only saying 7 generations back, we take our trauma from our ancestors. Now there is already 14 generations back. We can tap into that, and now we can walk with belief systems. Then if that's a truth that we are acknowledging now, right, that even through traditions has been acknowledged for eons, but then the opposite is also true, which we can also tap into the beauty. We can also tap into what we've learned. So therefore, we can also tap into the understanding of the cosmos. We can also tap into through the body, actually into the wider field of the universe. And through experiences of expanded states, there is something that happens that I sometimes feel sad about, which is we have a lack of tapping into magic into day-to-day. We can explain everything, But these kind of expanded states help us relate a little bit back into that magic. And magic, I don't mean believing in fairies, that's not what I mean with magic, but going magic into a state of awe, in a state of wonder, in a state of, when there you are, let's say, seeing a sunset on the most beautiful beach, and that moment you just feel the breeze on your skin and you're going, there's something here happening. There's just something special happening here, and it's a bodily sensation. And even if I'm speaking, my body's actually right now responding to that because I'm just bringing the memory back in my body. So even my body's saying, yes, I know that state, that aha moment state, that ah state. So as a closing note, my deep longing, my desire is for more magic to be present. So we can acknowledge the beauty and not only the wounding in our life or the complexity in our society or the hurt or the wars, but also that we're part of that beautiful and magical place as much as anything else.